Morning, y'all. I'm Brett, and I'm out here in the onion patch today. Today, I'm going to be harvesting some more of my onions. I've gone ahead and been harvesting a few of them for a few weeks to go ahead and be cooking with, and go ahead and get some of them on the drying rack as they've started to become available. But today, I want to show you a few of the signs of what to look for of when it is time to harvest our onions. Now, I planted these back, sometime in February. I believe it was mid-February. And so we're looking at about 90 to 100 days now. And when we're planting out our onion bunches, that's around harvest time, somewhere between 80 to 100 days. If you're growing from seed, you're probably going to be looking more at 120 days or so for that. But these are, that's approximates. There's a few things to look for to know when is it time to harvest our onions. Now this year we've had to deal with lots of rain and lots of worms coming in and eating on some of the green stalks there, and so I think that has affected a little bit of our growth. We probably could have gotten a little bit more growth from them if it hadn't been for the worms coming in, but we've still got lots of good viable onions this year. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going on. And so this is my onion patch, or most of it. I've got some in a few other locations. And here you can see a couple of tubs of where I've already been harvesting. And I am going to go back with my pepper transplants that I've been growing in the shed. We're getting them planted the last couple of days. It's a good, nice, sunny location. Now that the weather's really warm, these peppers are going to take off from there. And you can see in the background the ones that we're going to actually harvest today. But let's first take a look at these reds, and you can see in these onions here lots of good growth and everything. And let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. You can see each leaf coming up in this particular onion. And a way to know you're going to have good onions, one way to look at is each one of these leaves is going to correlate to a layer in the onion. So more leaves you get, more onion layers. There's another good one back in there. You can see that, nice and healthy plant. And you can see lots of big leaves. So these are going to produce some good sized onions. You can see this one, that's going to be a good sized one there whenever it's ready to harvest pretty soon. And these are getting close. And the way we know that they're starting to get ready is you can see the tips of them are starting to brown a little bit. So they're really focusing in on finishing up the bulb production here, but they're still standing upright for the most part. We've got one down in there you can see starting to lay over. But these are growing very well. Here's a couple more there that are starting to lay over. Them are a little harder to see, so we're going to move on from them over here where it's easier to actually see. Here's some of our beds where I've already harvested. And so I'm going back, these are some poblano peppers here and there. This one is mostly harvested. And I want to particularly show you these because you'll notice that I have let a couple of them go to seed. Now I've shown y'all in a previous video that whenever they go to seed, I pick those seed heads off the top, and that's what we had here, was the stalk of the seed head coming up. And I picked them off because I want it focusing all of that energy into bulb growth. Now the reason I've let a couple of these go to seed here, look at that pretty flower. You see how many seeds it's going to produce. It doesn't have to be very many, but we're going to allow a few of these to go to seed, and so that we can get our seeds for planting next year's onions. And let's look at this one here. Look at how pretty those flowers are when they open up. Alrighty. Alright, now I'm going to flip over here. These are some of our yellow onions, and here is how we know when they're ready to harvest. Now you may have a lot more greenery still left on the onion when it gets to this stage. Like I said, these This side of the onion patch, I think, was affected a great deal by the worms this year, eating on some of the green, thus making them mature a little faster. And we don't have a lot of that green left up at the top, but it'll do the same thing either way. When you have your onion start to do this here, that's when you know it's time to harvest. We can see the difference between this one and this one here. You see this one's starting to get soft. This one here is still pretty solid. Now we've got a lot of brown up top, but our stalk, if you feel right here on the neck, that's still very solid. What we're wanting to look for is when that neck right here, it becomes very soft. I can almost squeeze that together and that neck lays over. That's when it's time to come up. This one hasn't laid over just yet, but if you feel it, you can push it together. That, if we left it alone, that's gonna lay over in the next couple of days. So it's go ahead and time to get them. Now you can harvest these anytime you want. Dad harvests his sometimes just a couple weeks after he plants them. Go ahead and get some of those green onions and harvest throughout the season. I'll take a little of the green onion, but I like to try to let most of them get large so we can cut it up for our meals. Now, so when we get ready to harvest, like this one here, we'll just try to grab it down close to the onion there. If you grab it up top, you may end up pulling this neck off and having to get underneath the onion. But if you get a hold of that thing right here, right by the neck, you should be able to wiggle it just a little bit and pull it straight out. And look at the size of that one. It's not the biggest one we've grown this year, but that's a good size. That's got to be at least close to a baseball size onion there. And that's really nice. Now, some people, after you've pulled them, you can go ahead and cut the stalk off there, cut the roots off, peel it. You can take this straight inside and cook with it right now. What I usually do with mine is you can just lay them out here if you want for a day or two to dry where they're at. But I have a drying rack on the porch and one in the shed that we're going to be making use of. And so what I'll do is I'll try to keep them separated just a little bit. But let's go ahead and pull a couple of them here. So that one's a little smaller, but a good size onion still. Good size. And I will just put them on the drying rack like so, and I'll let them dry there. Usually I'll let them go a couple weeks. Now these may not take as long. Like I said, a lot of times when you harvest them, this will still be green. And we're gonna let that go ahead and dry out and let them roots dry out usually before we do anything to them. And then I'll come back and I'll cut them right here at that soft part on that neck, cut the roots off, and let them go ahead and continue to dry there until we're ready to use them. Now, another way, I didn't mention this at the beginning, you may see it in a previous video. People have asked about getting the good size onions. Sometimes you get little bitty onions, and for years I kept planting, didn't know what the difference was. Why were my onions so small? Well, when I pulled that, you can see besides my little mulch I put down here, that onion was basically sitting right on top of the ground there. It just had a little mulch around the side there. Well, when I go to plant, I try to get just enough of that little bunch in the ground to start getting them roots established. Now, some people will go ahead and bury them up higher, and that's okay to get them started. You want to get them roots good and established to be able to supply the nutrients to get an onion of this size. But onions are a little claustrophobic, I'd say. They like to be able to grow. They don't want anything impeding on their growth. So if you do get them planted deeper, once they're established, you're going to want to come back and pull a lot of that soil away from the top. We want that onion sitting on top of the ground as much as possible. That's how you're going to get the good size onion. And you may think, well, what about the sun exposure? Well, you can look at when we're harvesting them here in May, or right before the sun gets too intense here in Texas. But if we go back over to these, you can see a lot of that greenery. That's going to protect them from the sun exposure while they're growing. And so that is how we harvest our onions when we're growing. Let's go ahead and pull just a couple more of these to see. We got some real good ones this year. I've had some, there's even some bigger ones in here. I've already pulled some that are double that size. So this is going to be a good harvest this year. This should keep us going through the winter. When it gets later in the season, we may go ahead and slice up some of these and get them in the freezer. And when you put them in the freezer, they're gonna lose some of that crunchiness, but they're still gonna have good onion flavor to go with them. So I hope that helps y'all out today. If it did, if y'all want to see more videos like this one, be sure and leave me a comment down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch y'all next time.